Chapter 5 The Dementor. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban by J.K. Rowling. Tom woke Harry next morning with his usual toothless grin and a cup of tea. Harry got dressed and was just persuading a discontented Hedwig to get back into her cage when Ron banged his way into the room, pulling a sweatshirt over his head and looking irritable. The sooner we get on the train, the better, he said. At least I can get away from Percy at Hogwarts. Now he's accusing me of dripping tea into his photo of Penelope Clearwater. You know, Ron grimaced, his girlfriend. She's hidden her face into the frame because her nose was gone all blotchy. I've got something to tell you, Harry began, but they were interrupted by Fred and George, who had looked to congratulate Ron on infuriating Percy again. They headed down to breakfast, where Mr. Weasley was reading the front page of the Daily Prophet with a furrowed brow as Mr. Weasley was telling Hermione and Ginny about a love potion she'd made as a young girl. All three of them were rather giggly. What were you saying? Ron asked Harry as they lay down. Later, Harry muttered, as Percy stormed in. They had no chance to speak to Ron or Hermione in the chaos of leaving. They were too busy heaving all the trunks down the leaky cauldron's narrow staircase and piling them up near the door, with Hedwig and her mess, Perry's screech owl, perched on top in their cages. A small wickerwork basket stood beside the heap of trunks, spitting loudly. It's all right, Crookshanks, Hermione cooed through the wickerwork. I'll tell you out on the train. You won't, snapped Ron. What about poor Scabbers, eh? He pointed at his chest, where a large lump indicated that Scabbers was curled up in his pocket. Mr. Weasley, who had been outside waiting for the ministry cars, stuck his head inside. They're here, he said. Harry, come on. Mr. Weasley marched Harry across the short stretch of perimeter towards the first of two old-fashioned dark green cars, each of which was driven by a furtive-looking wizard, wearing a suit of emerald velvet. In you get, Harry, said Mr. Weasley, glancing up and down the crowded street. Harry got into the back of the car and was shortly joined by Hermione. Ron's discussed Percy. The journey to King's Cross was very uneven compared to Harry's trip in the night bus. The Ministry of Magic cars seemed almost ordinary, though Harry noticed that they could slide through gaps that Uncle Vernon's new company cars certainly wouldn't have managed. They reached King's Cross with 20 minutes to spare. The ministry drivers found the trolleys, unloaded their trunks, touched their hats to Mr. Weasley, and drove away, somehow managing to jump to the head of an unmoving queue for the traffic lights. Mr. Weasley kept close to Harry's elbow all the way into the station. Right then, he said, glancing around them, let's do this in pairs, as there are so many of us. I'll go through first with Harry. Mr. Weasley strolled towards the barrier between platforms 9 and 10, pushing Harry's trolley and apparently very interested in the Intercity 125 that had just arrived at platform 9. With a meaningful look at Harry, he leaned casually against the barrier. Harry imitated him. Next moment, they had fallen sideways through the soiled metal onto platform 9 3/4 and looked up to see the Hogwarts Express, a scuttled steam engine, puffing smoke all over a platform packed with Witcher and wizards sealing the children onto the train. Percy and Ginny suddenly appeared behind Harry. They were panting and had apparently taken the barrier at a run. Ah, there's Penelope, said Percy, smoothing his hair and going pink again. Ginny caught Harry's eye as they both turned away to hide their laughter as Percy strode over to a girl with long curly hair, walking with his chest thrown out so that she couldn't miss his shiny badge. Once the remaining Weasleys and Hermione had joined them, Harry and Mr. Weasley led the way to the end of the train, past packed compartments to a carriage that looked quite empty. They loaded the trunks into it, stowed Hedwig and Crookshanks in the luggage rack, then went back outside to say goodbye to Mr. and Mrs. Weasley. Mrs. Weasley kissed all her children, then Hermione, and finally Harry. He was embarrassed, but really quite pleased. Then she gave him an extra hug. Do take care, won't you, Harry? She said as she straightened up, her eyes oddly bright. Then she opened her enormous handbag and said, "Bet you always stand with. Here you are, Ron. No, they're not corned beef. Fred, where's Fred? There you are, dear. Harry, said Mr. Weasley quietly. Come over here for a moment. He jerked his head towards a pillar, and Harry followed him behind it, leaving the others crowded around Mrs. Weasley. "There's something I forgot to tell you before you leave," said Mr. Weasley in a tense voice. "It's all right, Mr. Weasley," said Harry. "I already know." "You know? How could you know?" I heard you and Mrs. Weasley were talking last night. I couldn't help hearing," Harry added quickly. "Sorry. That's not the way I have chosen for you to find out," said Mr. Weasley, looking anxious. "No, honestly, it's okay. This way you haven't broken what you were to Fudge, and I know what's going on. Harry, you must be very scared." "I'm not," said Harry sincerely. "Really," he added, because Mr. Weasley was looking disbelieving. "I'm not trying to be a hero, but seriously, Sirius Black can't be worse than Voldemort, can he?" Mr. Weasley flinched at the sound of the name, but overlooked it. "Harry, I knew you were, well, made of stronger stuff than Fudge seems to think, and I'm obviously pleased that you're not scared, but—" "Arthur!" called Mrs. Weasley, who was now shepherding the rest onto the train. "Arthur, what are you doing? It's about to go." "He's coming, Molly," said Mr. Weasley, but he turned back to Harry and kept talking in a lower and more hurried voice. "Listen, I want you to give me your word." "That I'll be a good boy and stay in the castle?" said Harry gloomily. "Not entirely," said Mr. Weasley, who had looked more serious than Harry had ever seen him. "Harry, swear to me you won't go looking for Black." Harry stared. "What?" There was a loud whistle. Guards were walking along the train, slamming all the doors shut. "Promise me, Harry," said Mr. Weasley, talking more quickly still, "that whatever happens, won't go looking for someone I know wants to kill me," said Harry blankly. "Swear to me that whatever you might hear—" "Arthur, quickly!" cried Mrs. Weasley. Steam was billowing from the train. It had decided to move. Harry ran to the compartment door and Ron threw it open and stood back to let him on. They leaned out of the window and waited Mr. Weasley until the train turned a corner and blocked them from view. I need to talk to you in private," Harry muttered to Ron as Hermione and the train picked you up. "Go away, Ginny," said Ron. "Oh, that's nice," said Ginny huffily, and she talked off. Harry, Ron, and Hermione set off down the corridor, looking for an empty compartment. They all were full except for one at the very end of the train. This only had one occupant, a man sitting fast asleep next to the window. Harry, Ron, and Hermione checked on the threshold. The Hogwarts Express was usually reserved for students, and they had never seen an old before, except for the witch who pushed the food trolley. The stranger was wearing an extremely shabby set of wizard's robes, which had been darned in several places. He looked ill and exhausted. Though he seemed like young, his light brown hair was freckled with gray. "Who do you reckon he is?" Ron hissed as they sat down and glared shut, darkening the seats furthest away from the window. "Professor R.J. Lupin," whispered Hermione at once. "How'd you know that?" "It's in his case," replied Hermione, pointing to a luggage rack over the man's head. With a small, battered case held together with a large quantity of nearly stuttered stamp. The name Professor R.J. Lupin was stamped across the corner as bleeding letters. "Wonder that he teaches?" said Ron, frowning at Professor Lupin's pallid profile. "That's obvious," whispered Hermione. "There's only one vacancy, isn't there? Defense against the dark arts." Harry, Ron, and Hermione had already had 2 defense against the dark arts teachers, both of whom had only lasted 1 year. There were rumors that the job was jinxed. "Well, I hope he's open to it," said Ron doubtfully. "He looked like one who good hacks would finish him off, doesn't he? Anyway," he turned to Harry, "what are you going to tell us?" Harry explained all about Mr. and Mrs. Weasley had just given him. When he had finished, Ron looked thunderstruck, and Hermione had her hands over her mouth. She finally lowered them to say, "Sirius Black escaped to come after you? Oh, Harry, you'll have to be really, really careful. Don't go looking for trouble, Harry." "I don't go looking for trouble," said Harry, nettled. "Trouble usually finds me." "How thick would Harry have to be to go to another who wants to kill him?" said Ron cheekily. They were taking the news worse than Harry expected. Both Ron and Hermione seemed to be much more frightened of Black than he was. "No one knows how to get out of Azkaban," said Ron uncomfortably. "No one's ever done it before, and he was the top security prisoner too. But they'll catch him, won't they?" said Hermione earnestly. "I mean, they've got all the muggles looking out for him too." "What's that noise?" said Ron suddenly. A faint, tinny sort of whistle was coming from somewhere. They looked all around the compartment. "It's coming from your trunk, Harry," said Ron, standing up and reaching into the luggage rack. A moment after he had pulled the pocket cinescope out of between Harry's ropes. It was spinning very fast in the palm of Ron's hand, and glowing brilliantly. "Is that a sneakoscope?" said Hermione, interestedly, standing for a better look. "Yeah, mind you, it's a very cheap one," Ron said. "It went haywire just as I was trying to eat Raoul's eggs to hand it to Harry." "Were you doing anything untrustworthy all the time?" said Hermione shrewdly. "No, well, I wasn't supposed to be using Arrow. You know, he's not really up to long journeys, but how else was I supposed to get Harry's present to him?" Stick it back in the trunk, Harry advised as the sneeze-scope whizzed fiercely. Oh, it will wake him up. He nodded towards Professor Lupin. He stuffed the sneakoscope in a particularly horrible pair of Uncle Verron's old socks, which deadened the sound, then closed the lid of the trunk on it. We could get it checked in Hogsmeade, said Ron, getting back down. They'll sell that sort of thing in Dervish and badges, magical instruments and stuff. Fred and George told me. Do you know how much about Hogsmeade? Asked Hermione keenly. I read it's the only eternally non-Muggle settlement in Britain. Yeah, I think it is, said Ron in an offhand sort of way. But that's not why I want to go. I just want to get inside of Honeydukes. What's that? Said Hermione. It's this sweet shop, said Ron, a dreamy look from his face. Where they got everything. Pepper, imps. They make you smoke in the mouth. A great fat chocoballs full of strawberry mousse and chocolate cream, and really excellent sugar squirrels which you can suck in class and just look like you're thinking what to write next. But Hogsmeade's a very interesting place, isn't it? Hermione placed it eagerly. In terms of historical sorcery, it says the inn was the headquarters of the 1620 Goblin Rebellion, and the Shrieking Shack's supposed to be the most severely haunted building in Britain. And Master Sherbet bowls that make you levitate a few inches off the ground while you're stuck in them, said Ron, who was plainly not listening to what Hermione was saying. Hermione looked around at Harry. Wouldn't it be nice to get out of school for a bit and explore Hogsmeade? Expect it will, said Harry heavily. You'll have to tell me when you found out. What do you mean, said Ron. I can't go. The Dursleys didn't sign my permission form, and Fudge wouldn't either. Ron looked horrified. You're not allowed to come? But no, wait. McGonagall says someone will give you permission. Harry gave a hollow laugh. Professor McGonagall, head of Gryffindor House, was very strict. Or we can ask Fred and George. They know a very secret passage out of the castle. Ron, said Hermione sharply. I don't think Harry should be sneaking out of school with Black on the loose. Yeah, I expect that's what McGonagall will say when I ask for permission, said Harry bitterly. But if we're with him, said Ron spiritedly to Hermione, Black wouldn't dare. Oh, Ron, don't talk rubbish, snapped Hermione. Black's already murdered a whole bunch of people in the middle of a crowded street. Do you really think he's going to worry about me attacking Harry just because we're here? She was fumbling with the straps of Crookshank's basket as she spoke. Don't let that thing out, Ron said, but too late. Crookshanks leapt lightly from the basket, stretched, yawned, and sprang onto Ron's knees. The lump in Ron's pocket trembled, and he shoved Crookshanks angrily away. Get out of it! Ron, don't! Said Hermione angrily. Ron was about to answer back when Professor Lupin stuttered. They watched him apprehensively, but he simply turned his head over the other way, mouth still slightly open, and slept on. The Hogwarts Express moved steadily north, and the scenery outside the window became wider and darker while the crowds overhead thickened. People were chasing backwards and forwards past the door of their compartment. Crookshanks had now settled in an empty seat, his squashed face turned towards Ron, his yellow eyes on Ron's top pocket. At 1 o'clock, the plump which the food trolley arrived at the compartment door. Do you think we should wake him up? Ron asked awkwardly, nodding towards the Professor Lupin. He looks like he could do with some food. Hermione approached Professor Lupin courteously. Professor? She said. Excuse me, Professor. He didn't move. Don't worry, dear, said the witch, as she handed Harry a large sack of Conlon cakes. If he's hungry, then he wakes up. I'll be front with the driver. I suppose he is asleep, said Ron quietly as the witch slid the compartment door closed. I mean, he hasn't died, has he? No, he's breathing, whispered Hermione, taking the cauldron cake Harry past her. He might not be very good company, but Professor Lupin's presence in the compartment had its use. Mid-afternoon, just as it had started to rain, blowing the rolling hills outside the window, they heard footsteps in the corridor again, and their three least favorite people appeared at the door. Draco Malfoy, flanked by his cronies, Winston Crabbe and Gregory Goyle. Draco Malfoy and Harry had been enemies ever since they had met in their first journey to Hogwarts. Malfoy, who had a pale, pointed, sneering face, was a Slytherin house. He played Seeker on the Slytherin Quidditch team. The same position had Harry played on the Gryffindor team. Crabbe and Goyle seemed to exist to do Malfoy's bidding. They were both wide and muscly. Crabbe was the taller, with a pudding basin's haircut and a very thick neck. Goyle was short, bristly hair and long gorilla arms. Well, look who it is, said Malfoy in his usually lazy drawl, pulling open the compartment door. Potty and the Weasel. Crabbe and Goyle chuckled foolishly. I heard your father finally got his hands on some gold this summer, Weasley, said Malfoy. Did your mother die of shock? Ron stood up so quickly he knocked Crookshank's basket to the floor. Professor Lupin gave a snort. Who's that? Said Malfoy, taking an automatic step backwards as he spotted Lupin. New teacher, said Harry, who got to his feet, too, in case he needed to hold one Ron back. What were you saying, Malfoy? Neville's pale eyes narrowed. He wasn't fool enough to pick a fight right under Teach's nose. Come on, he muttered resentfully to Grab and Goyle as they disappeared. Harry and Ron sat down again, Ron messaging his knuckles. I'm not going to take any rubbish from Malfoy this year, he said angrily. I mean it. If he makes one more crack about my family, I'm going to get hold of his head, and Ron made a violent gesture in midair. Ron, hissed Hermione, pointed at Professor Lupin. Be careful. But Professor Lupin was still fast asleep, the rain thick as the rain sped out further north. The windows were now a solid, shimmering grey, which gradually darkened until Atlantis flicked into life all along the corridors and over the luggage racks. The train rattled, the rain hammered. The wind roared, but still Professor Lupin slept. We must be nearly there, said Ron, leaning forward to look past Professor Lupin at the now completely black window. The Whites had hardly felt him when the train started to slow down. Brilliant, said Ron, getting up and walking carefully past Professor Lupin to try and see outside. I'm starving. I want to get for the feast. We can't be there yet, said Hermione, checking her watch. So why were you stopping? The train was getting slower and slower. As the noise of the pistols fell away, the wind and rain snorted louder than ever against the windows. Harry, who was nearest the door, got up to look into the corridor. All on all inside the carriage, heads were sticking curiously out of their compartments. The train came to a stop with jolt and distant thoughts, and Banks told them that the luggage had fallen out of the tracks. Then, without warning, all the lamps went out, and they were plunged into a total darkness. What's going on? Said Ron's voice from behind Harry. Ouch! Gasped Hermione. Ron, what my foot! That was my foot! Harry felt his way back to his seat. Do you think we're broken down? No. There was a squeaking sound, and Harry saw the dim back outline of Ron, wiping a patch clean on the window and peering out. There's something moving out there, Ron said. I think people are coming abroad. The compartment door suddenly opened, and someone fell painfully over Harry's legs. Sorry, did you know what's going on? Oh, sorry. Hello, Neville, said Harry, feeling around in the dark and pulling Neville up by his cloak. Harry, is that you? What's happening? No idea. Sit down. There was a loud hissing and a yelp of pain. Neville had tried to sick on Crookshanks.